Welcome, fellow viewers, to our new podcast series on the HermesHub channel. In this episode, I'll be interviewing Richard from the Gothi Greenwolf channel. In the interview, we'll cover his personal journey of discovering paganism and how the pagan community is alive and growing today. We'll cover questions ranging from what paganism is to archetypes and belief systems. If you want to hear more on similar topics, consider liking and subscribing. Your support is what helps the channel grow in quality. Also, be sure to comment your thoughts on some of the questions you see interesting. Without further ado, let's jump into the interview. Hello, Richard. Can you tell us something about yourself?
So I'm 35. I've been pagan probably about 15 years or so. I'm an ordained Gothi. I've been Gothying, which is not the technical term, for probably almost 5 years now. I'm a former Marine. Found paganism, found heathenry specifically while in the Marine Corps. So.
Okay. Can you tell us more about what is paganism and are the old gods still worshipped today?
So paganism is a really broad blanket term. Essentially, it means anything that's not Christian and polytheist. And yes, the old gods are worshipped today. Typically, it's kind of a broken line, meaning that it's a lot of like Reconstructionism, a lot of like neo-paganism, neo meaning new. There's probably about as many branches and different types of paganism as there's people with different, thoughts and ideas. But typically, colloquially, it's understood to be like European paganism. Your polytheist religions that predate Christianity.
Are there any types of paganism that are particularly popular?
So there's kind of four kind of main, and then there's like a lot of like smaller paganisms, pagan religions that are much like less popular and a little harder to get a hold of as far as information goes. So you have your like Kemetists, so that's like Egyptian. They don't often call themselves Kemet. A lot of the people that I know who are into the Egyptian don't actually know the word Kemet. It's actually the original term for Egypt. So Kemet. And then you have your Celtic, and that's a very, very broad term. Much like the Celtic peoples, it wasn't really like one society. It was multiple societies kind of connected by similar culture and religion and linguistics. And that can be like your Druids, a lot of your run-of-the-mill almost Wiccan types will kind of fall into that. And of course you have your heathens, your folks that are kind of into the Viking aesthetic and that kind of culture. Viking is not truly a proper term for that, but usually the layman understands when you say Viking. And then you have your Greek, your Hellenic. And then I should also caveat that there's Wiccans, but Wiccans aren't necessarily pagan. They're kind of a duotheistic because they believe in the, as opposed to multiple gods, it's a god and a goddess, and then it sort of disseminates from there, which comes from Gerald Gardner and a lot of the things that he kind of created and disseminated. And then kind of under that, you also have your inclusive versus exclusive paganisms. And inclusive, most people I think are inclusive. They're not trying to dictate necessarily how you live. They don't have necessarily a racial bias. A lot of people will find paganism through wanting to find their roots, but they aren't like exclusive to the root specifically. Like that was one of the things that drew me to Asatru, to heathenry. But yeah, I said most people are inclusive. Exclusionary heathens are kind of like theological purists, and then of course the racial ones, the folkish, that a lot of us are kind of familiar with.
Okay, a lot of that comes with the traits. So there's a big five inventory when it comes to the traits of our psychological being. And you have a spectrum of openness to experience and the opposite, like, let's say, closed to new experiences. That has a lot to do with the inclusive or exclusive behavior of people. And a lot of that is genetically transmitted. So you inherit your full potential of being open to experiences or at the other end. Most people are somewhere in the middle, basically, because it's a normal distribution, let's say. You have exclusive and inclusivity in all types of fields, from paganism to religion to politics. So you have the left, which is more, let's say, open to experience, and the right, which is more close to new experiences. So both need each other to work properly.
Yeah, I could see that. And then there's also something to be said of instinct. I think a lot of the archetypes and all that come from like our instincts. I don't think that's necessarily like pinpointed to one, ethnicity or race or whatever, but I think that comes from just evolving and evolving with these like judgment concepts in your head. The How did I say it in my archetype video? I call them psychological blueprints. We've evolved to have these like certain understandings and to quantify things certainly in our heads.
Can you tell us something more about your pagan journeys? How you discovered paganism? How your family felt with it? What they think about it? How's your life different from when you discovered paganism?
So when I first discovered paganism, that would have been in high school. I didn't consider myself pagan necessarily at the time. One of my best friends growing up, he became Wiccan about the same time his mother did. Actually, it's kind of funny because they both kind of discovered Wicca, and then like later on confessed to each other. But yeah, and so that was kind of my introduction, was being around him and a lot of his friends, and kind of dipping my toe into that. And I considered myself, probably from about 16 or so, I just kind of considered myself sort of an eclectic philosopher. No real pinpoint on religion. And then I was actually so I was 20. I remember turning 21 in MOS school. So MOS is military occupational specialty. It's job school for the military, right? Yes, and I wasn't in a great place mentally. And I realized that I needed to find some kind of religion. I originally picked up a book on Druidry, and it was dry. um, Druidry does not jive with my psychology for sure. But the term Asatru was in there to clarify. So Asatru is the term that the Icelanders put, attributed to this old religion. So it's kind of a modern term. There is an organization in Iceland called the Asatru the Asatru Fellowship, and they kind of coined the term like back in the, I want to say 70s or so. So relatively new. But anyway, so yeah, I found that, and that kind of like put me on this journey, and I've been Heathen ever since. And that was, I think, almost 15 years ago, 14 or 15 years ago.
So basically, you felt inner drive to discover a religion to follow, really.
Yeah, I couldn't see myself becoming Christian. A lot of my understanding of how the world worked at the time conflicted with Christianity, and yeah, so that wasn't going to work. But I still knew I needed some kind of something to push me. And then when I found heathenry, that's when everything kind of clicked. And I think that drives a lot of people to be pagan. Is it kind of like just like almost like a weird puzzle piece just sort of fits in, and everything kind of harmonizes. That's a good word for it.
And what do you feel today when you view Christianity and their practices, and basically as an idea and as an enterprise, let's say?
Well, as an idea, I think that it goes against the grain of a person's psychology. I noticed you did a video recently on shadow. I think shadow is one of the um, biggest problems with Christianity because they reject it so hard. It ends up becoming so repressed that they end up, I believe Carl Jung called it the beast within. They end up feeding that beast within to the point where it becomes, this egregious thing, and can end up taking over. And I think that's why you see a lot of Christians, especially Christians in places of power, that abuse that power and end up causing harm because they're not dealing with that shadow side. Whereas with paganism, with that polytheistic mindset, you tend to be able to adapt and look at that shadow because you don't really have the same concept of good and evil. It's not necessarily that we don't believe in good and evil necessarily, but it's that it's not as black and white. There is a gray area. With the Christians, also I think reflects institutionally, they try to impose that black and white thinking, and we see it in a lot of things. Like, I try not to get too political, and I have met heathen cops, but but one thing I've noticed with law enforcement is that they are predominantly Christian, and they will predominantly have that that black and white mentality, and it reflects in their work. Yeah, so I would say that's definitely foundationally one of the biggest parts of Christianity that kind of shows that it's negative. And then obviously there's the plurality of archetypes. I think what's it, Jordan Peterson tries to impose archetypes a lot onto like Christianity, but in reality Christianity is trying to be like, we've got one giant archetype. And that's not really like, it just doesn't make sense because they're diversified, right? They're quantifications of various different mental blueprints, and then the gods reflect those archetypes, and they kind of disseminate and all that. And so yeah, Christianity just kind of rejects that whole lot, and I don't know, they oversimplify at the same time. Like, I don't know if you've looked into Zoroastrianism, but that basis is really what kind of started that dualist thinking of like good, bad. There's either a good or a bad. There's no gray. Yeah, I mean, it causes a lot of problems, I think.
Well, in paganism, I see the benefits of it, but I also see some downfalls because Christianity has the individuated self, let's say, totality in Christ that should encompass all the archetypes. He's the most individuated man, let's say. He's the archetype of a whole person. I cannot find some characters like that in paganism, as we embody our psychological self in those religions, in those paths. If we think about them archetypally, basically paganism can have that downfall, let's say, because you're a fragmented self, basically.
Right, but you're saying because it doesn't have, I guess, to put it in a more Platonic term, like the highest God form, the highest true man or whatever. Well, there is some of that actually. Like, if you look at Tyr, Tyr is very much kind of a higher self. There's a little bit of a new age understanding of like the Alfar, the elves, that also say that they are like our higher self. So it's there. I wouldn't say it's as bold, but and it's definitely not something that's within the in the mainstream pagan discussion. But I mean, it is there, and like I said, I think Christ is just kind of an oversimplification of all that. So, and then you also have the lower selves, which are part of yourself, like the New Age community sees that dwarves are more of a lower self. It's your base mechanical thinking, and then interestingly enough, the dwarves actually have a connection to Hephaestus. But yeah, so I think it's there.
Okay. What's your standpoint when it comes to religion? Are you a religious person? How do you see religiosity in a man, in a person, basically? How it operates in you?
I think it's important to have a semiotic understanding. So semiotics is like the study of symbolism, right? So we as human beings see things more as symbolism, and as opposed to something you might see in like a manual, right? So when I look at a tree, I don't think about the characteristics of a tree. I'm not thinking about and I'm trying to think of how you would break that down into numbers, but I don't see it as those.
Photosynthesis.
What's that?
Photosynthesis, you don't think about those fragmented stuff.
Right. So you see, when you see the word, when you hear the word tree, you see a tree in your head, or maybe even the word tree. But so you understand it as a symbolism. So you have this archetypal understanding of like what a tree is, right? So you have this base understanding. But yeah, so semiotics is pretty important because that's how our minds are wired. So I think a religious understanding is important. I don't think that we should always give into magical thinking. I think that there's a lot of this kind of comes back on the New Agers, even though I just use them as a more of a positive reference. But in that community, you have a lot more suspension of disbelief, and I think skepticism is pretty healthy. We shouldn't always believe in Bigfoot. We shouldn't always just assume that like fairies exist. That hyper religiosity can lead to some negativity, and I actually, so I'm security's my day job, and I've done mental health security, and one of the things I noticed very frequently, and obviously this is anecdotal, and I've only really worked at one facility, also doing patient transports, but anyway. Something I noticed pretty consistently was hyper-religiosity there. It was Christian hyper-religiosity. I think we had one person that like mentioned Thor and Zeus at some point, but I think she was a proclaimed Satanist. So, but yeah, so hyper-religiosity I think can also exacerbate certain mental health issues. So it's good to be skeptic. It's good to want some kind of proof. But at the same time, we need to try to understand and quantify like what the gods are. That's not to say that we should default think that the gods exist. I think that's something that a lot of new pagans will kind of make the mistake of. They make the mistake of being like, okay, I'm going to adopt this religion. So what are the beliefs I need to checkbox? A lot of new pagans will make that mistake of wanting to mark those boxes of, okay, I believe this, I believe this, I believe this, but they don't. But it's like, why are you checking those boxes? Like, okay, yeah, I want to be this, I want to believe this, but like, do you have a reason for that? And that's so I kind of have like a 3-step to like incorporating your beliefs, and that's how is it done in the modern? So you are examining like how people believe in the modern and like the neo-pagan community, what they do, what the ritual is, what the belief is, all the above, and what's the historicity of it, how it was historically done, what proof is there proof, because a lot of the times it's UPG, unverifiable personal gnosis, which is people kind of filling in the gaps with their own understanding, to put it in a brief summary. And then the last one I think is the most important, and that's the why. Why are you doing this? Why do you believe this? An example I like to give a lot, because I think it's a pretty easy cut and dry example, is the land vitir. So vitir just means spirit, right? So your land spirits, at the end of the bloats for my kindred, I will put together, a plate of food, and we put it by maybe a sacred spot, like a tree or something. And I'll kind of talk about how we are honoring, the land spirits, and we are acknowledging the environment, and that's kind of what that does, is that takes a symbolic understanding, that's your semiotics, and attributes something positive to it. So we're reminding ourselves that we need to take care of the environment, that the air we breathe and the the nature around us is important. Yeah, so that kind of, I guess, surmises the negative and positive aspects of religion. Because on the negative side, you don't want to necessarily engage in magical thinking, not to the point where it affects your life. And then on the positive side, how does this benefit me? And that's kind of really the caveat there, is examining religion and seeing, does this affect me negatively or does this affect me positively? So even if you do believe in an almighty sky father or multiple sky deities, whatever whatever belief system you decide to have, the ultimate end goal should be, is this affecting me positively or negatively, no matter what magical thinking or whatever that you're engaging in.
As I see, you have a toddler, so how do you go around with the Christian festivals, educating him about religion?
It doesn't come up a whole lot because he's 3. Mostly he's discovering dinosaurs right now. But he's around for our rituals and stuff. We don't have a whole lot of like Christian things going on necessarily. Not where I used to live in California, and as far as I've seen, not here in Texas. But I at the same time, I don't like hold him back from it. Like all of his grandparents are Christian. Like I haven't spoke to my mother recently about her beliefs, but I'm pretty sure she's some kind of Christian. Dad definitely is. And then my wife's parents, my father-in-law is actually a pastor. And then, obviously his wife is engaged in that whole thing. So, I don't like they're all back in California, but when they would watch him, I didn't say, oh, don't take him to church or nothing like that, because what I want to raise him to do is be able to decide for himself. I want to give him the tools to be able to, disseminate, like, is this good for me? Is this a belief that I want to adopt? If he comes home someday and he's wearing a big old crucifix, like, I'm not gonna, react negatively. Might have a little bit of a conversation, but it's going to be philosophical, and that's kind of how I've been with my parents. My mother is always accepting of whatever I'm doing, so she's kind of an easy sell. But my dad, he's born again Christian. He's kind of an old Christian biker dude, and he's done like youth pastoral stuff, that kind of things. But he's got a pretty strong faith, and with him, we just have conversations, and that's how I'm planning on raising my son as he becomes more cognizant. And just because it's bad to impose things on people. Even it's like right now I'm a supervisor at my job, right, in security. I don't like knife hand my problems away. I don't like dictate how people live. That's not how I function, and that's not how I'm going to raise my son. So yeah, it's just really about giving him the tools to logically look at things and figure out life, really.
That's great to hear. I also seen that you speak a lot about archetypes at your channel. How did you get acquainted with them? Did you feel possessed by a certain archetype in your security job?
So it's kind of interesting because on some online spheres, the archetypes don't really seem to come up, or they get rejected. But my experience has been that archetypes just always surround the pagan community. They're just always, like, even whispers in the background, they're still part of that conversation. yeah, they've just always been around. So like, I think it's a logical conclusion to come to the point where I'm at. There was God, what was it? I think about maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Um, my wife, because she grew up as a pastor's kid, right? So she's had an interesting relationship with religion. so so she kind of got me to start thinking. She's like, well, why do you believe this? Why this, right? Um, and so then I had to really, because I'm not somebody that like will reject a question necessarily. I feel like I have to examine it, and even if it's not like in the moment, I'm going to be thinking about it later. So with that and with her line of questioning, that's when I really like got into, okay, well, why do we believe what we believe? Why do I believe in the gods? Because before that I was a hard polytheist, and I didn't know why I was a hard polytheist because I didn't think about it hard enough, honestly. And I think for me the archetypes, like I said, they've been around like the entire time I've been pagan, but I think that's just kind of the logical conclusion of thinking about hard enough. Obviously, that's my bias, but there was a second part of your question I can't remember.
Your security job and if you
Oh
felt.
yeah, that's right, my security job. So no, not necessarily in my security job. I'm definitely somebody that relates a little more with the Synex. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram necessarily, but I'm a type 5, so I'm very like knowledge based and very I like to look things up and know why I'm doing things. So I would say that my life philosophy is projected in that. I'm very much somebody that will approach things, wanting to know as much as possible, which is not always the case. Like doing hospital security, sometimes the nurses would call up real quick and they're just like, come to room 5. And you're like, okay, I don't know any details, but I'll figure it out when I get there. And yeah, so you don't always come in with knowledge, but the ability to like look at a situation and just kind of disseminate what's going on, that's pretty important. I would say that yeah. So for me personally, obviously Odin, the Senex would be that. But then I think Thor is, as far as like heathen terms go, is the protector archetype. He's a force of order, using the hammer to layeth the smacketh down upon the forces of chaos. And Yeah, so as far as like protector archetypes go, I would think that Thor would kind of fit that. But I don't think that in any way, shape, or form I'm overcome by that. Um, I think that Cynics part of me is distant enough from almost disassociative to a certain degree, and I'm able to kind of like, to use more of a, I guess, chess analogy, to kind of like step back and look at the board before actually approaching, even if it takes like half a second to do so.
Well, did being a pagan put you to some questionable scenarios in life?
Hmm. Um. No, I think because like I said, I was in the Marine Corps. I think getting back from Iraq put me in some questionable scenarios in life, because I was working through some traumas there. So there's some mental stuff that I hadn't been really dealing with. But I wouldn't say being pagan has necessarily done that. I did in my youth. There was a minute where I had like skinheads and stuff around me, and that was definitely some questionable stuff. But I don't think that's necessarily because of paganism. I think that was just because I was an angry youth, and I honestly, I get curious. So if there's anybody around me, especially somebody that like I haven't met their walk of life yet, I tend to want to ask questions. As I've gotten older, I'm a little bit more tactful about it, but but yeah, just because I like to understand things. But yeah, I don't think being pagan has necessarily put me into any bad situations. Yeah.
At your channel, you mentioned archetypes a lot, and the pioneer of archetypes was Carl Jung, let's say. He says that there is something profoundly sick in a polytheistic soul. So, what do you think about that quote?
I think that Carl Jung grew up in a Christian society. I haven't gotten through the whole thing, but I've been listening to the audiobook of, what was it? Man and His Symbols. And like, there's a lot of stuff in, and you can kind of hear the bias, and it's not just him. I believe it's a couple other Jungian psychologists as well. But yeah, I think that that just comes from him being in a Christian society and having those Christian influences. I think if he was in a more modern time, he'd probably realize that he was just kind of quantifying polytheism. Yeah, I mean, it could be said if like a Christian were to want to get more, like, want to hold on to their Christianity, but get into the archetypes, that they could get like into saints and stuff, I suppose, and that would kind of have that pluralistic, not necessarily polyaletheic, but yeah, that pluralistic understanding of psychological blueprints. But I don't know, it feels kind of a stretch. So
Yeah, many gods got turned into saints, basically, and
yeah. I think Bridget and Dionysus are two fairly apparent ones.
and Veles and Saint Blaise.
Okay, yeah.
Are there any tips you would give to a person that's interested about getting into paganism or learning more about it? Are there any books or resources you have?
Go to my channel and subscribe. No, I try not to push my channel too hard. I try to get people to find what works best for them. But I do have an intro to the Northern Path on my channel, and I call it the Northern Path because like any journey, there are steps, and like I even say in that video, Odin he wasn't born as Odin, not the Odin we understand. He had to go on a journey through the nine worlds as Vegtam the Wanderer. He had to sacrifice himself to himself on Yggdrasil, the world tree, and take up the runes. He had to give his eye to Mimir's well to drink of it, and that those are steps to become, that the Synex that we understand him to be. That's why I call it a path. But yeah, there's a bunch of links in that video specifically, and they range across the spectrum of heathenry specifically, and yeah, it's important to find what sources work best for you. Like one on there that I think is kind of at one end of that spectrum is Freya Norling. Because she's more intuitive. She considers herself a Volva, which is a wand woman. It's a Norse witch, and she's Norwegian specifically. And then, there's a couple of them that are a bit more middle of the road, like Eric Wordweaver and Midgard Musings. And then I'd say I'm kind of on the other end of that with trying to use, psychology and having that logical understanding. I try to disseminate between my emotional beliefs, which are my literal wanting to believe in gods and all that, and then my logical beliefs, which are archetypes and what I can, or at least believe I can, prove and quantify. As far as outside of heathenry, I can't think of any sources offhand. Obviously, I have a huge focus on heathenry. Yeah, I can't think of any offhand that aren't just heathen. But yeah, that's my intro video. That's what I usually send to people, like on Reddit and stuff.
Your battle between the emotions and your logical self is quite well represented in the book Master and His Emissary by I. M. Gilchrist. So he's speaking about the hemispheres. It's not the duality of hemispheres, like one is for art and the other one is for math, so that's not supported by the facts and science. But he compiled a book of neuroscience, like experiments and articles, and he showed that we can view our world through the lens of either hemisphere. So the right one is the wisdom one, it's the silent one, and the right hemisphere perceives the totality of being and it digests all. It's the first to feel and to sense stuff, let's say. And the left hemisphere is overly optimistic. It's the one that speaks, basically, because the Broca's area, your speak area, basically is centered in the left hemisphere. They did tests that some patients, because they had like strokes, have their hemispheres split. So they asked the left hemisphere, does it believe in God? And the patient says no. But when they ask the right hemisphere, it says yes. So that's like quite a substantial experiment, let's say, but no one's talking about it in the scientific community because we still obey the old paradigm of empiricism and atheism, let's say. So I'll point the viewers to check that book out. It's great. I'm gonna put it in the comments below.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I'll have to check that out. I haven't actually heard about that book.
Okay, are there any final thoughts or things you want to speak about?
I mean, I think that was pretty comprehensive. I know, obviously, I have my YouTube channel. If people want to check me out, go the Grimwolf. Yep, Grimwolf is GRIMWULFF. I wanted something simplistic, but something you can understand, and it still has kind of a bit of an old English spelling, because it means like, hidden or masked wolf, which actually associates with like the Ofidnar and all that. And obviously, Gothi is a Norse priest. It means God man, but it's our equivalent of a priest.
What kind of videos do you make there?
I make videos on heathenry. Occasionally, I'll throw my opinion in there. I try to make it as apolitical as possible, because one, I don't want to engage in that like rage marketing, which I actually have a video about. And two, I want my audience to be as broad as possible. I don't want to like pigeonhole myself on the left or the right or anywhere in between, because I don't think that's necessarily that important. Obviously, that reflects our values to a certain degree, but so I try not to get too political on it, and and just kind of the basics of heathenry, my understanding of it, my journey of it, and I think it's fairly comprehensive, even if some of my earlier editing is absolutely terrible.
The same goes for my channel. The first few videos are the experimental ones, let's say.
Yeah, your channel's pretty good. Like, you do a lot of the voiceover stuff, which is good. I think you're a little more scripted than I am, which honestly, oh my god, that saves so much time in editing when I do scripts.
Yeah, scripts are really useful to do because if I like put on the camera and speak, I tend to miss stuff that I wanted to say, but when I write it down, it's there. So it's easy to like just read it.
Yeah, and because you're actually like looking at the words. I try to put I'll try to do notes, because I like some of my videos to feel a little more organic. I want people to see me and know that I'm kind of speaking from the hip, as it were, so that they kind of know who they're listening to, and I'm not trying to just blow smoke up their skirt. So.
That's great. Thank you for being a guest at my channel. So be sure to go and subscribe to the Gothic Greenwolf, and see you in the next video. If you want to hear more on similar topics, consider liking and subscribing. Your support is what helps the channel grow in quality.